Hey, okay, so I got the next one going on how a muscle actually contracts. So it took us a long time to get there, but now we actually get a look at how the actin and the myosin do their thing. So this is 5-5. The muscle, I should put in there, finally contracts. So there's a contracted muscle right there, and there's an uncontracted muscle. And just to remind you of some stuff, that we've got the tendon right here is attached to the immovable bone at the origin. And, I can't spell, and that the muscle is attached through a tendon onto the movable bone by the insertion. So we talked about the other day, but nice to have a little visual to go with it. Alright, here we go. Moving on. There are 6 steps to how a muscle contracts. So we have been learning all about how we can get the information from the axon terminal all the way in here, doing the wave, remember, doing the wave. And then we get to the vesicles right here, which contain acetylcholine. And the wave causes calcium to flow in, which causes the vesicles to go down and barf their contents out into the synaptic cleft. And then each of these guys, the acetylcholine, goes into the junctional folds where it finds a receptor, sits down on it, and that continues the wave on down here through the sarcolemma of the fiber, and then it takes a little detour down here. Now remember, this is just a hole, so it does continue around the other side and keep on going as well. So the action potential, the wave, works its way down the T-tubules. So that, remember, the T-tubules are just an indentation of the sarcolemma into the myofibril. So it works its way down here, and then what that does is it releases, well, actually that's step 2, so I'll get there in a second. So step 1 is that the action potential works its way down the sarcolemma and down the T-tubule. So I got a big red arrow going right there. There it is. And you should have this picture in your book and your packet as well. Step 2. The action potential moves past the triads. So as it goes past, everybody in here says, oh, there they went, and that causes the terminal cisternae, which are these areas right here, to release the calcium out into the sarcoplasm, which is the cytoplasm of the muscle cell. So what's happening is that the action potential doesn't jump ship over to the other side, but it's like all these guys are inside and they're just waiting. They're sitting there staring, and they're like, wait. And then once the wave goes by, that's their signal. Okay, time to go. And so that tells them, jump out, we're free. Once the calcium is free and floating in the sarcoplasm, then we have step 3. Step 3 says that some of the calcium is going to find its way down into the actin, and it's going to find troponin. Remember, troponin is that little 3 peptide sequence there, and which is the guard. And there goes the light. Excuse me one moment. It's nice to have light when I actually make these things. There we go. Okay, so I can see you and you can see me. Actually, I can't see you. And so these were the chaperones, if you remember. And so these are blocking the binding site on the actin, because actin has a little dip right there that says, hey, that's where I want the myosin to go. So the troponin's going, no, you cannot have that. And so we need the calcium. The calcium is going to bind into 2 little spots right on the troponin, and troponin likes that. It's like a gift. And so if you bribe the chaperones enough, they will get out of the way. So the calcium is the bribe to get the troponin out of the way. So some of the calcium binds to troponin. So calcium, I should make that a little bit darker so you can actually see it. So calcium jumps onto troponin, and that's the bribe to get the troponin out of the way. So that changes shape, and so this little guy kind of slides down a bit, and that removes the blocking action of the tropomyosin, which is a big long rod down the middle here, which is kind of holding it in place. And so all he's doing is going back and forth like that. Okay? So calcium pops out, finds the troponin, gives itself as a sacrifice to the troponin. Troponin and tropomyosin kind of get out of the way, making room for the myosin to bind onto it. Step 4. When the calcium levels are high enough, the myosin heads will attach to and pull the thin filaments toward the center of the sarcomere. So when there's enough calcium, when enough of these guys are out of the way, the myosin is going to grab onto the actin, and they're going to do a little action like this. So they grab on and go, they let go, and grab on, like this. And they just keep on doing that. So it's kind of like they're walking the actin down. And then when they let go, goes back to normal. So the calcium, we need lots of calcium in order for this to happen, because we got to bribe all the chaperones to get out of the way so enough myosin can jump on board and push it down the way. So that's that step right there, which my big arrow is pointing to, that the myosin will attach onto the actin and pull it and tug it down. And what that does, if this is my actin right here, and this is my myosin right here, so that's going to be pulling the actin closer together. So he's going to move this way, he's going to move this way, and same thing down here, they're going to move together. So these guys are going to move towards each other. Myosin stays put. He doesn't move at all, just the actin. Okay, next thing. Now we got two arrows pointing here, but it's for the same step. When the signal ends, which is only like milliseconds later, the calcium levels, the calcium pops off of the troponin, and then he flows around into the sarcoplasm, the cytoplasm, and when the calcium levels drop, when the calcium pump moves calcium back into the CR. So there's little pumps all over here, and it says, come on, come back. And so what they do is they go for a little ride, and they get pumped back into the terminal cisternae in order to wait for the next flow. So calcium, they're just they get used. They jump out, wee, move out of the way, okay, I'm free, and then they go back and jump back in, and then they go and over and over and over again. So all of this from the calcium pump able to push things back in. Now, if the calcium can't get pushed back in and the calcium stays attached to the troponin, well, then your muscle just keeps doing this little thing until it gets locked. And that kind of causes the muscle cramps as well. We had talked about the acetylcholine causing a continuous contraction. Well, same thing here. If I can't get the calcium back in, then my muscle is going to stay rigid and solidified almost. All right, last step. When the calcium levels in the cytoplasm, sarcoplasm, are too low, the tropomyosin block is reestablished. So the chaperone says, oh, okay, I'm done. I don't have my bribe anymore, so I'm going to get back to my job, which is blocking the myosin. So you can see right here that the tropomyosin and the troponin have gotten back in their original positions, which poor sad little myosin is now has to let go of the actin, and the cross bridge is released, and that causes the actin to go back to its normal state. So we've got actin in its normal state is like this. So there's the actin right there. And then in the condensed state, or the contracted state, then the actin is really close to each other, and the myosin is in the middle like that. So this is relaxed up here. Looks like a piece of bacon. So this is relaxed here, and this is contracted here. So once all the calcium goes back and the guards get back their location, then that causes it to go back to the original resting scenario. Okay. Now, calcium, because it's one of the main players in here, is usually low in the sarcoplasm because most of it's hanging out in the SR. Until, of course, an action potential wave goes by telling them it's time to jump out. Now the calcium ions, if I have the calcium just floating around in the cytoplasm, well, they may join with a phosphate because there's a whole lot of ATP breaking down in here. And if you remember, ATP is made of ADP and a phosphate group. Well, that phosphate group, PO4, really likes, because he's got a negative, I'm going to say 3 charge, he really likes calcium, and so they're going to stick together. So if it wasn't for these molecules called calsequestrin, because it sequesters the calcium, and calmodulin, what they do is if there's too much calcium going on inside of the cytoplasm, then they come in here and go, don't stick together. Because if they stick together, we get calcium phosphate or hydroxyapatite, and that makes bone bad inside of muscles. There's a disease where something similar to this happens. As you can see right here, all of this used to be muscle. You can actually kind of imagine where these muscles were. But what happened was inside of the muscle it began to solidify and turn into bone matrix and eventually became bone. And so what happens to these people here is they actually get stuck in whatever position. It's a slow process, not like, woo, I turned into bone. But it's a slow process, and over time they get stuck in whatever position was the last movable one. So it's kind of nice to have calsequestrin and calmodulin because that prevents the buildup of bone inside of your muscles, because you know that would be bad. All right. Now, calcium binds to troponin, right? Causing it to change shape and then moving away from the myosin. Once exposed, though, so once the actin is exposed, we're going to get 4 events. So what we're doing is we're just taking a look up close at what's actually going on between the actin and the myosin. So there's 4 little steps here. One is called the cross bridge formation. And so what's going on here, so what we're considering this our start point. Okay? Now you're thinking, but it's already joined together, which was like step 4 back then. I know, it's weird. Just go with it. So what's happening here is that here's the myosin right here, and here's the actin up here, and the myosin head has 2 little tag-alongs. It's got ADP and a phosphate, and so this guy is full of energy. So when he's got the ADP and phosphate on there, that energy is in the myosin head, and so he's got enough energy to jump onto and stick to the actin. So what that means is that the calcium has already come through, attached to the troponin, and got it out of the way. So my highly excited myosin has jumped across and grabbed hands with his lovely girlfriend, the actin molecule. Okay, so that's the first thing. Cross-bridge formation. Myosin, full of energy, is attracted to the binding site on the actin to form a cross-bridge. So when they're attached like this, we just call that a cross-bridge. Okay, next thing that's going to happen is 2. The working or power stroke. So we had just said that this happens. Well, this is a little more detailed. So here's 2. Whoops, sorry about that. Says the myosin head, and that's kind of blocking the way. There we go. The myosin head pivots. So if you notice the angle he is here compared to the angle he is here. Because remember, he's full of energy, right? Well, he wants to get rid of that energy. So by getting rid of that energy, he goes like this. Boop. And so as he bends, that pulls the actin along. And that causes the actual movement of the sarcomere to get a little bit closer together. So, okay, so he attaches here in step 1. Step 2, he bends, causing it to move. But at the same time, the ADP and phosphate fall off and go somewhere else. We'll deal with him in a second. Okay, so we got ADP and phosphate from the last contraction, because these were on there from, you'll find out over here, they're just kind of chilling, so they go off and go do their own thing. Actually, they get put back together, so we'll get to there in a second. Okay, the next thing, so after I have moved the actin down a bit, I need to let go. So that's the 3rd step, cross-bridge detachment. So now remember, these guys disappear, so now he's empty. So a new ATP molecule is going to come and jump on it, but he hasn't released his energy. So all the energy is in the ATP, not in the myosin. So even though you think, oh, ATP equals energy, yes, but the energy is still in it, not in the myosin. So the myosin goes back to his comfy, relaxed position, which is almost laying down. You can kind of see like this. And then what happens at the same time, what's going on previously, is that my calcium is heading back towards the SR, which is causing the troponin to go back to its normal position. So I've got my myosin, he sits back down and relaxes and gets into his calm, chill, comfortable position. So the new ATP molecule binds to the myosin right there, loosening its hold on the actin. So the ATP is kind of like, hey, look over here, let go of your actin friend. And the cross bridge releases. Next thing, last thing, is the cocking of the myosin head. And if you smiled or giggled right there, seriously, it's the word cocking, okay? Get over it. So what happens here, and you see the big red arrow showing it right here, we need to get the myosin head ready to go to grab onto the next actin. So cocking of the myosin head, the ATPase, remember ACE means enzyme, so we've got right here, there's ATPase, which is going to take ATP and split it into ADP and phosphate, just like we had up here. That releases enough energy to kind of wake them up a little bit. because notice he's laying down over here. Well, now he's kind of sitting up a little bit more. So when the ATP and the ADP are released and the energy gets released, that gets him back up, ready to go for the next spot. That provides the energy needed to return the myosin to its pre-stroke high energy position. So when we look at him, we can see that he is full of energy. He wants to hold her hand. So there goes the light again. Come on. Hang on. Run down the hall. Okay. I didn't have to run far. Usually I have to run up and down the classroom. Okay, so I've got the, he's in the position. He wants really, really bad to hold Actin's hand, really, really bad, but he can't. And so he's got all this pent-up energy, and he's like, come on! So what is he waiting for? He's waiting for troponin to get the heck out of the way. So what's going to happen? You got it. Once calcium comes in and blocks it and moves out of the way, he's like, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, I get to hold her hand again. And then we start all over again. Okay? So that is the fine detail of what's going on in the steps that we talked about before. Now, one little, oh, did I distract you with those? I'm sorry. One little caulking of the myosin only shortens the muscle on average about 1%. But in order to get my arm up here, I need to actually shrink that muscle by 35%. So the only way I can do that is to not have one go at a time, but several. And so what happens, it's more like a walking than it's So if I've got all the myosins all doing this at once, it's more of a walking. And so it can actually get shorter and shorter and shorter. And so I figured, what's better than looking at a short contracted muscle than to look at that contracted muscle right there, and that contracted muscle right there, and that one, and that one, and that one, and I should stop now, shouldn't I? Okay, see y'all tomorrow. Bye.